Hello and welcome. In today's video, I'm going to share with you 10 creatures you need to tame before ASA comes out. But just before we get into it, make sure to like and subscribe as it really does help out the channel. In at number 10 is the Rex. Now the Rex is by far one of the most influential creatures in Ark and just one of the most influential dinosaurs ever. This thing, when Jurassic Park came out, was an absolute boomtown. The Rex just gained popularity so fast, and now everyone that thinks of dinosaurs will think of the Rex. The Rex is just so iconic. But in terms of its use in Ark, why should you tame one in the game? Firstly, the Rex is just simply a very cool creature and is 100% worth a tame at some point. But in terms of doing bosses with the Rex is an extremely useful creature as it is very balanced. It has a very reasonable amount of health, it has a very reasonable amount of damage as well. Maybe just don't put it in water as it doesn't really like that at all and it is very slow in those conditions. But in terms of bosses, its health really does just keep it alive throughout those boss fights, and its damage is enough that it will sweep through all of those bosses with ease. And the fact that it has a saddle means it has easy access to getting some armor and some good defense, which makes this thing a really great combat creature. In at number 9 is the Snow Owl. Now this thing did originally come out on Extinction and it definitely has many uses on that map, but luckily now this thing is available on many other Ark maps that are free apart from the purchase of Ark itself, like Fjordur. Now in terms of the Snow Owl's use, this thing has a crazy number of uses in the game. Firstly, like the Griffin, it has that all iconic gliding ability. But in terms of the Snow Owl's glide compared to the Griffin's, the Snow Owl's glide just feels a lot smoother and a lot more refined, and it is definitely a lot more satisfying to use than the Griffin's glide ability. But it is still going to get you to zip across the map with absolute ease. But also on top of all of that, they have many other uses too. Namely, they also have their heat-seeking ability, which is extremely useful for any PvP scenario where a person is just sitting outside your base waiting to raid it, or they have run off after they've tried to raid your base. It is just really useful as you can quickly see wherever they are and dispose of them as you wish. And also it's great in a PvE scenario as you can just find creatures that may be small or hidden. Also, you're going to want to level up your stamina as these things will heal creatures, which is a really great ability. But just do remember that this will heal everything in its healing vicinity. It won't just heal your tamed creatures, it will also heal wild creatures, which can be useful if you're doing taming, but it will also heal the enemy, so be careful when using that. In at number 8 is the Reaper. Now this thing definitely did take the world by storm when it came out, when Arboration came out. And still to this day, it is an absolutely insane creature that you need to tame at some point. Also, in terms of taming the Reaper now, if you have Genesis Part 2, you can tame the Reaper really easily if you use a tutorial Raasclark made. The Reaper can literally be your first tame on that map. But on all other maps, the Reaper is definitely a difficult tame and shouldn't be one to be underestimated. But once you have one of these things, it is an insanely useful creature. This thing deals a wealth of damage, it can zip across the map with reasonable speed, and it is insanely good at all things combat. And it actually just is pretty decent in all Arboration use cases. This thing is great if you want to go raid rock drake nests, as it has the damage and health to keep up with it. And I think you can even use it in the boss arenas of Arboration, even though you might not be able to. But either way, these things are great boss creatures too, whenever you can actually use them for bosses. The Reaper is definitely a good tame if you can get over the hurdle of actually taming one. In at number 7 is the Dynamicus. Now this thing is available to every player that does have Ark Survival Evolved, as this thing spawns on Valguero, and Valguero is a free map. And also this thing is a reasonably easy tame. It just requires you to steal an egg from a Dynamicus nest and then raise it from there, which actually isn't too bad. You will just need the necessary equipment such as torches and maybe a few weapons so you can actually get out of that situation once you've stolen the egg, as all of those Dynamicuses are going to be running straight for you after you have stolen it. But once tamed, the Deinonychus is an absolutely insane creature that can rip through so many creatures with absolute ease. It can latch on to larger creatures and then deal so much bleed damage, and when they're in packs, they have a pack buff on top of that as well, which is so overpowered, and the fact that that can be used on bosses as well really makes these things one of the best carnivores in Ark in general. Definitely a tame worth getting at some point. Also, on top of all of that, these things have really great mobility, which sometimes is lost in carnivores like the Rex. These things can parkour across the map, they can somewhat glide, and also they are immune to fall damage. What a simply great creature. In at number 6 is the Bloodstalker. Now this thing, when it came out, used to be an absolute marathon to tame, and it still is to this day. But now with the thanks of the Desmodus, these things are a little bit easier, as the Desmodus is a really easy way for harvesting and farming all of those blood bags, which requires to tame yourself a Bloodstalker and also a Desmodus as well. And now blood packs have even more use with the Desmodus, such as being used in sanguine elixirs. Either way, with the Bloodstalker, this creature has absolutely insane mobility, and on Genesis Part 1, this is your only creature that you can really zip around the map on, as flyers are completely banned on Genesis Part 1. They may spawn on the map, Pteranodons do spawn on Genesis Part 1, but you will not be able to ride them in any way. So the Bloodstalker is your only option in Genesis Part 1 to travel around if you are not using transfers. If you are, you could probably use something like Rock Drakes and Maywings, but that doesn't completely suit Genesis Part 1 completely. But the Bloodstalker definitely does take some time to learn. Its flying can be finicky at first, but once learned, you have earned yourself a significant amount of hexagons, as many missions utilize the Bloodstalker, such as the bog races. So if you don't know how to fly a Bloodstalker and you do have access to one, it is a really great shout to get learning how to fly one of these, as they are very useful on other maps like Arboration as well, where there are loads of things to grab onto. Maybe just don't use them on Valguero like I have here. In at number 5 is the Rhino Ganatha. Now this is accessible to every Ark player as well, as this thing will only spawn on the island and Lost Island in those swamp areas. And what a creature this is, and what a marathon of a tame this creature is. Also, if you did want to tame this creature, you can always look at my tutorial. I will leave a link up here right now. Either way, the Rhino Ganatha is Ark's most recent addition, and if you did want to know how to tame one briefly, essentially you need to kill a male Rhino Ganatha, then you will take its pheromone. You'll want to tame yourself a big creature, preferably a Bronto, then find a female Rhino Ganatha, net gun it, and then deal loads of damage to it until it is almost dead. Then when it comes out of the net, it will impregnate your dino, but make sure to feed your dino that pheromone, otherwise that process won't work. And then your dino will enter a hunger state where you will need to feed it certain items. That isn't necessary, but it is necessary if you want 100% effectiveness. Then, Xenomorph style, the Rhino Ganatha will come straight out of your dinosaur. Sadly, your dinosaur will die, and then you'll have yourself a Rhino Ganatha baby. In terms of the Rhino Ganatha's use after you've tamed this thing, this creature is an insanely good flyer. It travels at immense speeds, and it does a wealth of damage, and it has a wealth of abilities. Definitely one to get at some point. In at number 4 is the Carcodontosaurus. Now again, this is one of Ark's most recent additions as well, being the second most recent creature that has been added to Ark Survival Evolved. And when this thing was added to the game, it was an absolute hit. This creature is essentially the Giga, but better in every way that the Giga couldn't be. Firstly, this thing doesn't have a raise meter, which takes a lot of stress away from using the creature. Also, the Carcodontosaurus has a much better amount of movement. This thing actually moves at a reasonable speed, and its stamina isn't so low you have to stop every 5 seconds to regen your stamina. Also, on top of that, the Carcodontosaurus, when in a blood rage, will deal even more damage than the Giga, and its health is pretty much equivalent. The Carcodontosaurus does have a very interesting taming method though, and will require no tranks whatsoever. Essentially, you'll need to find one. I would recommend finding one in the Highlands biome of Raasclark. Don't even bother trying to find one on the island, as these things are extremely rare on that map. Then once you found one, you need to drag dead dinos to it, and it will eat it. You'll probably want to wear ghillie as to not spook it, but that is a somewhat unnecessary step. Then once that stage is done, it will allow you to ride it, and then you can go around on your Carcodontosaurus and absolutely decimate everything until that taming bar has reached 100%, and then you have yourself a really great carnivore. In at number 3 is the Rock Drake. Now, like the Reaper, this thing was first introduced on Arboration, but now can be found on many other maps such as Crystal Isles, where you will find their nests. And now these things are a lot more accessible to the general public, and I'm so glad they are, as the Rock Drake is one of the best creatures in Ark by far. These things have an insane ability, which is their gliding ability, also shared by the likes of the Maywing. Now, you may think flying is just much better of an ability to have instead of gliding, but once you get used to actually gliding on a creature, and I'm not great at gliding on a Rock Drake, I'm more adapted to Maywing gliding, these things can be as good or even better than flyers, as they're just so much more versatile, and they can travel the map so much faster than any other flyer could. Now, in terms of the Rock Drake, apart from its gliding ability, the Rock Drake deals a wealth of damage, and what would you expect from its huge, massive teeth? This thing is actually a really insane creature. You only need one of them, and you can very easily cheese Rockwell with absolute ease, which is the boss on Arboration. I'm not talking about Rockwell or Genesis Part 2. Don't bring one Rock Drake to that. That will not go very well at all. The Rock Drake is a very versatile creature across many maps, and is definitely one to be tamed at some point. And the way you tame it, if you heard before, you need to find their nest, and again, raise it, and the temperatures are very specific for this one, so you'll definitely need some air conditioners. Don't try and use campfires and all of that, just use air conditioners for these things. It is so worth it to use air conditioners instead of campfires. Campfires usually don't work. In at number 2 is the Shadow Mane. Now, another very recent creature to Ark, coming out in Genesis Part 2. Yes, that was 2 years ago, but I would still classify this thing as a recent creature. And what an absolutely insane creature this is. The Shadow Mane has a wealth of abilities and a pack buff on top of that. It also does have the hydration buff shared over from the Spinosaurus, which will boost its damage even more, and with mate boosts and all of that, this thing can become an absolutely insane fighter. And it has a wealth of mobility as well. These things can jump insanely high and can even teleport across the map and go invisible. The uses for these things are pretty much endless, especially for bosses and also just general tasks in Ark. The Shadow Mane is one of the best creatures, if not the best creature, for doing the job. But also, sadly, their taming method is pretty rubbish and will take a lot of time and a lot of effort to get done. Essentially, you get fish baskets and you have to feed it to them while it's asleep. Sounds easy, it's not. And finally, in at number 1 is the Maywing. Now, I would consider the Maywing the best creature in Ark by far, and I urge everyone that has access to taming a Maywing to tame one of these things. They are insane for doing any kind of breeding with their milk ability. They can also steal enemy tames while they're being raised. You may have not known that fact. And also, they are by far some of the best travel mounts in Ark. Actually, I would say the best travel mount in Ark. Their gliding is just so much smoother than the Rock Drakes, and I'm actually adapted to using it. So again, I do have some bias there, as I have spent a lot more time with the Maywings than I have Rock Drakes. But either way, the Maywings are just so fast when gliding around the map. As you can see here, I can get across so many things so quickly, and my game is stuttering a lot because of this, as it's struggling to load in all of the things as I'm simply going so fast the engine can barely handle it, which is when you know you have a fast creature. And that, by the way, was on official speeds, which is a bit crazy. But also, considering it's a glider, you can level up its movement speed as well, but I doubt that would do anything in flight. The Maywing is an extremely good creature every Ark survivor should tame. But anyway, that was the end of today's video, and I hope you enjoyed. Also, comment your top 10 creatures you want to tame before ASA comes out, and I will see you all later. Bye.